Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. So much going on, some of which we predicted, of course, because we're geniuses. Stacy?
In fact, Max, you are Bitcoin Willy Wonka, according to Comedy Central's Trevor Noah.
Really? Yeah, that's an amazing. You had right there in the little TV screen, Trevor Noah of The Daily Show talking about Max Keiser and all the mayhem he's creating all over the world with Bitcoin.
Yeah, I would play the clip, of course, but he played clips of Max, but, the YouTube algorithm would take us down. Should we play a clip back of him playing a clip of us? All very meta, right? Well, speaking of meta and Max Keiser being the Willy Wonka of Bitcoin, the world is falling into the, what Max has been saying for a long time, what Keiser Report has been reporting for 10 years now. We started 10 years ago right here on Keiser Report talking about Bitcoin, and nations are falling, billionaires are falling, and the latest is Russian billionaire Oleg Deripaska blasts Bank of Russia for ignoring Bitcoin. Quote, even poor El Salvador has taken a simple path recognizing Bitcoin as a means of payment. As we reported, El Salvador has passed a law whereby Bitcoin is now legal tender in El Salvador. And here this guy from Russia, billionaire, wants to Russia to do the same.
Well, he's absolutely right. And what we've been saying on this show is kicking in. You've got global hash war, as I call it. The countries are now competing to accumulate the most Bitcoin. It's part of the game theory that's built into the incentive stack. That is the magic of Bitcoin. And it was unpredictable who exactly would take the first step. We had talked about possibly Japan, possibly Iran, possibly Russia. Turns out that El Salvador is taking the first step toward a Bitcoin standard, making Bitcoin legal tendered. Their GDP is now set to triple. Property prices are already rising. There are people flooding into the country to take advantage of this Shangri-La of Bitcoin. And yeah, a Russian billionaire is right to say that it's time for Russia to do the same thing. It's the ultimate chess move. I hope they don't wait too much longer because, we've been on here for 10 years saying this exact same thing. My friends in Moscow, you're going to feel awfully silly when you have to pile in at $300,000 or $400,000 a coin. You could have gotten in at $1.
Right. But, as I mentioned in a recent interview that we did in the Bitcoin space, is that the United States took the world off a gold standard, off a hard money standard. And that was in 1971, 50 years ago in August. Here, it would make sense that one of the smallest economies in the world did the opposite, took us back onto a hard money standard. And it could get away with it because it was so small. It's the first of the game theory. The game theory predicts that this would happen, that somebody has to make the first move, and El Salvador has made it. And the other important thing is, okay, El Salvador is a tiny economy and only has a population of something like 6 million people. But, they have volcanic energy, they have geothermal energy, but you can't export geothermal energy, and that's a problem. With Bitcoin, they could start exporting geothermal energy, i.e. mining Bitcoin. The same thing with oil or natural gas rich countries like Russia. Look at the pipeline dramatics, like all the geopolitical tension about that. Well, you don't even need to build pipelines. You just mine Bitcoin, and that's the money you earn from it. Like Bitcoin changes a lot of things.
Yeah, it's what Iceland's been doing for years, right? They have geothermal energy and they export it in the form of aluminum ingots, right? So they have aluminum smelters in Iceland and they smelt the aluminum, then they export the aluminum and they export their free energy essentially from geothermal. El Salvador has essentially almost free energy from volcanic eruptions from the geothermal. They can mine Bitcoin, turn energy into Bitcoin. Now they've got a hard currency and they can now play. The World Bank tried to say, hey, you can't do it. And then El Salvador said, no, your charter actually says we can do it. So the World Bank will have to rewrite their charter. But the World Bank is irrelevant. So is the IMF. So is Christine Lagarde in the face of Bitcoin. And so now you've got a situation where Jack Mahler's has a company called Lightning Strike. They are signing up 20,000 people a day in El Salvador. You mentioned they've got a population of 6 million. That means that within a year, the entire population of this country will be on Lightning Network, which is second layer Bitcoin, doing payments and earning and sending remittances, are going to add billions of dollars to that economy by cutting out the middlemen like Western Union that charges exorbitant fees. So this is a country that is defining the 21st century. And the longer other countries wait, the worse it'll be for them because the price will just keep going higher.
Right. And speaking of remittances, of course, El Salvador was already on a dollar standard, right? They were already on a US dollar standard. They use US dollar as legal tender there. But in terms of, what hard money does for a small economy like this that has been beset by inflation, for a long time, and often periodic bouts of very high inflation for a long time, is it neutralizes monetary policy, right? It restores honesty and confidence to businesses and foreign direct investors. So if they want to invest in that's part of the reason why they adopted the US dollar, but the US dollar is the strongest of the fiat currencies, which are all they're melting ice cubes against Bitcoin. So you see it already, the immediate response as businesses who want to go there because they know no matter what, the Bitcoin is the stable, neutral network upon which they could build the foundation of their businesses and enterprises.
Well, think about the president of El Salvador, how much easier his job will be because now his monetary policy has been outsourced to Bitcoin. So there's no central bank wrangling. And there's no worry about, what's the central bank going to do? Now, contrast that to the United States, for example. You've got the entire political spectrum you've got one side of the political spectrum, mostly Democrats and liberals, begging the central bank to print more money for their social justice agenda. Then you've got the other side, mostly Republicans on the right, who are begging the central bank to stop printing money because you're fiscally being irresponsible and you're destroying the dollar. Get rid of all that. You don't need the central bank. Just outsource your entire monetary policy to Bitcoin. You see this brilliantly played out almost every day on Twitter by one of the MPs in Canada who gets up and makes speeches every day about the dangers of money printing. And imagine Canada. If you removed all that conflict from the Canadian government, if all governments in the world can remove all of the internecine conflicts that come around because you've got a central bank that's doing stuff that most people believe is irrelevant, fraudulent, or both.
Well, since the pandemic and the lockdowns, of course, we've seen extraordinary money printing measures. We've been covering that for the past year. And the inflation is starting to hit hard that even Fed members that are relative doves compared to the rest, they are turning hawkish. They're talking about the really fast, rapid rising inflation. And I saw this melting ice cube in my inbox in two ways this past week. First of all, they have this, an app whereby you could order your supermarket groceries and they deliver it to your home here. Well, I was using that during the lockdown. And then I hadn't used it for about 4 or 5 months, and I just hit reorder of an old order, just order the same things. And the same things, the same items went from $278 to $312. That's a jump of $24, almost 10%. And then I got a notice from Amazon I had some coffee, stored for later, to purchase later, and it jumped by 30%. Coffee prices went up by 30% for me, doing my part to boost GDP growth. Ask me anything. And I have a link to it showing that the price jumped from $7.46 to $9.99.
This is where the rubber hits the road. This is where all this talk about monetary policy, macroeconomics, Keynesianism versus Austrian school, we've been saying for years that most people glazes over and they're like, well, whatever, dude. This is when suddenly it gets real, because suddenly energy and food prices start ratcheting it up in ways where you suddenly can't afford the same food and energy that you were able to afford. And now you're asking questions. Why is the purchasing power of my fiat money collapsing? Where did this come from? Well, we've been saying this now for 10 years, and we're trying to prepare you for this. Now it's hitting, the inflation. The Fed is saying two things that are both fraudulent. Number one, they're saying it's transitory. It's not. Or secondly, they'll say it's not inflation, it's deflation. They define rising prices in the grocery cart and at the energy pump as deflationary. Why? The same way that, for the reason that Charles Manson talked about his escapades in Los Angeles as being somehow freeing for the people that he was slaughtering, right? They're psychopaths. They're psychopaths.
In terms of it being transitory, a lot of what we've been doing over the past 20 years since the elevation of China into the WTO is we've been able to mask a lot of the inadequacies of an all global fiat system, especially domestically as we're sending jobs overseas as part of the Triffin dilemma. The thing is that the price of goods especially goods have been getting cheaper and cheaper because of China, right? Well, that is ending as well. And this chart, imports to the U.S. are now a source of inflationary rather than deflationary pressure, dollar weakness driving price increases. And you could see that it started with the pandemic, and this is the inflation and the goods coming from China. And this is the amount of the US dollar trading against a basket of currencies globally. So you have two things: as China's starting to have pricing pressure, power, also in a way like you saw in the 1970s. This is, remember, we talked about the similarities between now and the 70s, and that basically China has a cartel. They are the single monopoly builder, manufacturer of all goods that are shipped around the world. So they're the only ones still manufacturing. A lot of other economies are shut down. The US is especially still shut down because of the huge amount of UBI, the huge amount of stimulus money going to the people. So because the goods aren't being shipped elsewhere, China does have pricing power, just like the OPEC oil cartel did in the 70s when the U.S. first went off the gold standard. Remember, they started to ratchet up the prices because they were like, we don't trust that we're actually getting anything in return for our oil.
So it was a bad idea for Bill Clinton to admit China to the World Trade Organization because 30 years later, as many people predicted, they would simply start raising prices and we would no longer have manufacturing capacity because we shipped all of our factories and jobs to China, and now we are the client state of China. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back, much more coming your way. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. People are still buzzing about Miami 2021, put on by Bitcoin Magazine. The event drew tens of thousands of people from around the world. Bitcoin is becoming mainstream. It's going global. Countries are adopting it as their legal tender. I had a chance to interview and talk with Michael Saylor, CEO of MicroStrategy, who's been buying billions of dollars of Bitcoin. Check it out.
Dude. All right. Max and I, we talked this morning to coordinate our outfit, and I wanted Max to wear black, and Max wanted me to wear white. So we agreed. Yeah! Have a seat. All righty. Michael Saylor. Giga Chad. Max Keiser, High Priest of Bitcoin. Father, I have sinned.
My first question is, what does it feel like to be a newbie?
I was going to tell you, I realized that I first bought Bitcoin 1 year ago yesterday, and so this is the end of my rookie year.
Right on. All right, I wanted to get into that. So going back to around 2014, your friend Eric Weiss, he was talking to you about Bitcoin. You kind of ignored it. Then in 2020, he mentioned it again. And within a few weeks, you were buying tens of thousands of Bitcoin for you and your company. What happened?
Well, I guess I lost faith in all of my traditional investment strategies. I didn't really think much about the dollar and about inflation. I thought there was no inflation, and I thought I could just sit and own big tech companies and the world would work itself out. And I guess around March, everything changed, and the monetary inflation rate tripled, and it became pretty clear that the big tech trade was a crowded trade. You know, at the point that my niece in her early 20s was telling me about Apple stock, you know, I figured that maybe it wasn't cutting edge. So I looked around and I discovered Bitcoin. And when I discovered Bitcoin, I thought, well, this is digital gold on a big tech monetary network, and it's going to grow by a factor of 100. And then I thought, well, I should buy as much as I can. And what I tell people even this day is I was buying it, and I was thinking, I have to buy as fast as I can, as much as I can, because someone else might figure this out before, and then I won't be able to. And
okay, that's really interesting for the shareholders. But, I mean, my understanding is that you were visited by the ghost of Satoshi at night and came to you in a dream and converted you. That's not the story.
Yeah, Satoshi speaking through all of her or his disciples on YouTube.
Your laser eyes are pointed right at my brain right now. Are you stealing my private keys?
No, you should keep your private keys.
This should save me.
I don't want your private keys.
Really? Okay, well, we just met, so I guess that would be a bit forward. Let's move on to some recent comments you've made. You were on the talking about Bill Maher recently, and you said the following: there's something cruel and tasteless about a rich white male who wants to deprive billions of poor men, women, and children in Africa, Asia, South America of basic human right of economic self-preservation so they can generate a few laughs. That's a very kind of profound thing to say. And can you just talk a little bit about this idea of property rights for billions around the world and what Bitcoin offers and how you see that?
Yeah, well, I think after you study Bitcoin, the light bulb goes off. And what I realized is anybody on earth that wanted to own anything, that wanted to own some property, has a choice. You can buy land somewhere, but someone can tax it and take it away from you. You can buy gold, but someone can take it away from you. You can buy stocks, but you can never take possession of it. You can buy debt, you can never take possession of it. You can buy jewelry, people will take it away from you. And Bitcoin is the apex property of the human race. It's the first time we figured out how to create true property that you can take possession of with full custodial rights, that's least likely to be impaired, that's most mobile. And so, yeah, it doesn't matter if you have $1 billion. If you have $1 billion, you can buy a building in Manhattan or Bitcoin, you'd rather have the Bitcoin. And it doesn't matter if you have $387. If you have $387, you can still buy the Bitcoin, take it anywhere. And if you compare that to buying silver or gold or land or a stock, your custodial and your property rights are impaired by everything else. And so I think Bitcoin is truly a seminal invention of the human race, because for the first time in human history, we can grant property rights to 8 billion people. And that's what I think is cool.
Right. Is Bitcoin designed to attract attacks? It seems that it is, and the level of attacks are rising to the state level, et cetera. And is it a bug or a feature?
I think that which does not kill Bitcoin makes it stronger.
Right. All right, let's talk about energy for a second. So, total energy, global energy production is about 160,000 terawatt hours per year. I'm going to ask the audience right now, how much of that goes into Bitcoin? The choices are 10%, 5%, 1%, or 1/10 of 1%. Of that, how many people think it's 10%? Raise your hand. 5%? 1%? Right, this poll sucks. 1/10 of 1%? Right, and as you point out, a third of that, 50,000 terawatts per hour, is wasted. You point out that literally Bitcoin is running on a quarter of the wasted energy. It's so little of that energy goes into Bitcoin, and yet we have this FUD, this ESG thing going on. What's your current thinking on this?
I think that Bitcoin is an extraordinarily disruptive, beneficial technology to the entire energy industry. And as I studied it, it became clear to me that it's the highest value use of intermittent energy. It's the highest value use of renewable energy. It's the highest value use of wasted or stranded energy. And it's just the highest value use of energy, period. And it's a solution to developing power plants in remote locations. It's a solution to driving up efficiency of plants and driving down cost. And it's a solution to solving any kind of challenging energy problem. And I think as the world understands it, they're going to embrace it.
The recent news out of China is that a lot of mining is leaving China now. It's coming to the U.S. They're shutting down their coal production, et cetera. Is this, how do you see this developing in terms of how mining is going to be distributed around the world? Let me ask you this. It seems that if we went on the global Bitcoin standard, total global energy use would be cut by an enormous amount because you're defunding central banks, you're defunding fiat money, you're potentially defunding huge military operations just by going on a Bitcoin standard. Isn't that the greenest thing anyone could possibly do?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Look, I think Bitcoin is the most efficient use of energy that the human race has yet come up with. I looked at the annual report of Google, and Google puts about 170 or 180 billion dollars of energy into their business to create 1.8 trillion dollars of an asset. Bitcoin puts $4 billion of energy and capital investment to create an $800 billion asset. So Bitcoin, you put in $1, you get out $200. Google, you put in $1, you get out $10. I studied the entire S&P index and all the annual reports. You put in $1, you get out $4. If you look at a bank, JP Morgan, they spend $1 to generate $3.8 of value. And if you study an airline, they put in $1 to get out 40 cents. So Bitcoin is, it's some 20 times more efficient than Google, and it's 50 times more efficient than a normal company, and it's 500 times more efficient than real energy producers. And I think Bitcoin miners are underappreciated. I mean, they're the path they're the first line of defense against the entire network. They're securing the network. And the way that Bitcoin mining works is they're finding the jurisdiction that has the most political support. So Bitcoin miners are finding political capital. They're finding energy capital. They're finding the cheapest energy. They're finding engineering capital. They're engineering these beautiful Bitcoin mining centers that are heat engineered, very complicated. They're finding technical capital in terms of semiconductors and ASICs. They're putting all that together with the raw energy in order to provide the security to the network, and they're migrating continually to the cheapest power, the most supportive political jurisdiction, and they're instigating upgrades in the technology. And they're doing that dynamically without being told to do it, to the benefit of everyone in the entire ecosystem. I think that's really a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Right on. So when Christine Lagarde, who's running the European Central Bank right now, refers to Bitcoin as an escape hatch, what does she mean? Is that she's seeing it as a negative, but I would posit that maybe you would see that in a different light.
Well, when you say Bitcoin is savings technology, in a world where everyone's dissipating their energy, the most rational thing is to conserve yours. And so Bitcoin is conservation of energy. You can store your life force in fiat, and you're going to lose 1% to 2% a month. You might lose 4% a month in a collapsing currency or faster. You can store all of your economic energy in credit, and that's not much better. You can store it in equity, but then you take the risk of a company, and you never know when. Like, look what just happened to AMC yesterday, right? Right. If you're going to store your money in AMC or Viacom or Bitcoin, at least Bitcoin has no CEO to print 10 million more Bitcoin overnight, whereas that might happen with an equity. So when we talk about an escape hatch, if you're looking for a safe haven, I see Bitcoin as the most secure, most reliable, most certain thing in the entire economic universe. And if you're looking for some place where you can store your life force or your economic energy, you know, there's no real question, right? Bitcoin, you can store it and take it with you wherever you want, or you can put it in land and estate subject to a governor, a mayor, a country, or you can put it on the stock exchange and you can worry about what the CEO or the board of directors will do the next day.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. That's going to do it for this episode of Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. Until next time, bye, y'all.